Welcome back to Brewery Days. This is the second half of the boil. I'm still adding regular additions of flavouring hops, and this is a mix of Goldings and Fuggles mostly, with a dash of Chinook. For some reason I didn't write down the exact quantities. I don't know why, but this set of videos is really just documenting my methodology in general rather than the specific beer, because this is really quite a while ago now that I made this, and I didn't review it, but I remember it to be rather a nice bitter. I had 3 additions of hops, some for bittering early on, this being a bitter and all, and then from half an hour before the end of the boil onwards, I add lashings of flavouring hops, lots of little handfuls all the way through really. I find that adding hops little and often, if anything, makes a slightly more complex hop profile. That was a top tip from a head brewer. I think I might have read it in a Wetherspoon mag, or I heard it somewhere anyway, and it certainly doesn't do any harm. Gives you something to do. Also, if you put all the hops in at once, if you're not careful, you can get a boil over because of all the trapped steam. I've had that before now as well. You don't want that. Also, you'll lose half the hops you threw in, so that's not a good idea. Little and often. And then finally, the last addition I do after the cold break, during the wort chilling process, when the wort has been chilled down to about 80 degrees. At 80 degrees, that's still hot enough to kill off any microbes, to stop any infection, but no longer boiling, so you're not just boiling off all those lovely essential oils and resinous flavours that are essential for your beer to have some aroma. I find that that's more effective than dry hopping and less risky, in my opinion. Okay, I've got my trub spoon. Give it a little stir, just to agitate the hops a little bit. Make sure they're getting involved in the rolling boil. It's quite mesmerising watching the hops. I can imagine the smells as well, or the smell of them all. But now, joined with the resinous aromas of the hops. Oh, I wish I was brewing now. I wish I still had some of that bitter. Okay, now it's time to introduce Irish moss. So I do this maybe about 10 minutes before the end of the boil. Irish moss is actually a seaweed, but it's incredibly gelatinous, and also has a charge, an electrical charge, which attracts proteins to coagulate and then therefore be able to fall out of suspension. Something like that. I'm not great on the chemistry, but I can tell you it makes a huge difference to the clarity of the work going into your fermentation bin. I wouldn't brew without it. Okay, I pop my wort chiller in, also about 10 minutes before the end of the boil, to allow it to get sterilised. And now I'm going to cut the power and put the lid on and start the cold break. So I'm going to set my timer for 30 minutes. And go off and get a cup of tea. So now 30 minutes later, I'm connecting up my hosing to my wort chiller, or connecting my wort chiller via the hosing to the water supply. I think I might invest in some better fittings for this because it's a bit of a palaver. And I didn't actually film that bit, but you can imagine that it got cooled. I also didn't manage to film the filling of the fermentation bins, but there they are bubbling away. And they're not the only source of noise in the room. It's my lovely cat Fred. And then the last thing was to take a reading with my hydrometer for the original gravity, so that I know how much of it has turned to alcohol. And then next on to the bottling.